Oh, so thanks everyone for joining us. It's lovely to see familiar faces from this week of people that are joining for the series, the virtual series for this week. Thanks everyone that has joined us already. And closing out the week with Paige talking about this great topic and thought work and how we use that in the space that we're doing. As we get started, as people are coming in from the waiting room, if you want to introduce yourself in the chat feature, just in sharing your name and pronouns and perhaps where you're joining us from today. If you want to, just in being able to, oh, hey, Nash, how's it going? So good to see you. And folks, if you want to just share those introductions there in the chat, that would be great. I'm Abby Prince. I'm the Director of Program Quality and Management at LeaderShape. And I'm so glad to be able to host these sessions this week. I'm so glad that we're doing these throughout the academic year, but hopefully looking forward to hosting some over the summer as well for folks when perhaps you've got a little more downtime, a little more availability to take on some learning and some work being done within our profession as well. Zoom is a familiar platform for folks, I think, at this point in pandemic, especially, but for folks that maybe haven't used Zoom or you're more familiar with other platforms, if you want to post comments or questions in the chat, if you want to, in a friendly way, unmute yourself and ask questions throughout our time together, but here's instructions on how to change your name and add pronouns to the session as well, if you would like to do that. I want to offer, as we get started, a land acknowledgement, and just in thinking about the spaces where we are, where you all are joining us from as well, and thinking about the people who came before you on those lands and acknowledging the painful history of genocide and forced removal from those lands as well. I'm joining you all from Central Illinois, and we're on the lands of Potawatomi and Kickapoo First Peoples. And so I'm glad to be able to join you and then spending time and thinking about those who came before us on this land as well. If you're not familiar with LeaderShape, I want to offer a vision and mission statement for our organization here. LeaderShape, our vision is a just, caring, and thriving world where all lead with integrity and a healthy disregard for the impossible, with a mission of transforming the world by increasing the number of people who are committed to that vision as well. So welcome to the LeaderShape community. If you haven't already joined us, we're so glad to have you. Some of you might be familiar with your own definition of leadership. This is the definition of leadership that LeaderShape subscribes to here. So leadership involves living in a state of possibility, making a commitment to a vision, developing relationships to move that vision into action, and sustaining a high level of integrity. Effective leadership takes place in the context of a community and results in a more equitable society. So as we think about that guiding principle of leadership throughout our time together today, I hope this definition is helpful for you all. And I'm excited to be sharing this space today with our facilitator, Dr. Paige Haber-Curran, who is walking us through this topic of how we use thought work to enhance self-awareness, well-being, and leadership. And Paige, would you like to introduce yourself to folks?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. I'm Paige Haber-Curran. I use the she series pronouns, and I'm joining you today from lovely San Marvelous, as folks like to call it here, but San Marcos, Texas, at Texas State University. And I'm a faculty member here. I'm an associate professor with our Student Affairs and Higher Education Master's program. And I'm really excited to be here today.
Awesome. Thank you. Paige has provided a couple of polling questions to help guide us in our conversation and thinking about maybe some context of who's in the room with us. So to start us off, I'll launch our first poll question, which you should see now. In what industry do you work? So as you want to respond to that poll question there. I think, Paige, these responses are not going to surprise us, but it's still good to see where folks are coming from. A couple of people in healthcare and business and nonprofit spaces. And it looks like most people have responded to that poll. So I'll go ahead and share those results with everyone now. So you can see that. Most folks are in higher ed, 77% of people in higher ed there. So we will get to some other poll questions later on in our conversation today. That was the first of 3 poll questions. So just to give you a guidepost about what's happening next, there's our first poll question there for you. But Paige, I will turn things over to you as we kind of get started in our conversation.
Great. Thank you so much, Abby. As I mentioned, I'm a faculty member at Texas State University, and I'm just feel like I could spend this whole hour just jumping on chat with all the wonderful people who are on here. It's so great to see people joining from all over, but also from different chapters in my life. I think I even saw somebody from my high school pop up on here, which is awesome, from my undergraduate experience. And then, of course, wonderful colleagues with whom I've worked here at Texas State or through LeaderShape or other places in this higher education world. Although many of the folks on this in this meeting today or this discussion come from a higher ed context, this is really going to be focused on stuff that you can implement in all different aspects of your life, professionally and personally. So if you're one of those folks that's like, wait a second, is this only for higher ed folks? Absolutely not. And I really hope and invite you, hope that you will, and invite you to fully engage in this conversation today. I want to thank Vernon, who I don't think is on the call today, for inviting me to do this, and Abby for co-hosting today, as well as the rest of the LeaderShape staff. LeaderShape holds a very, very special place in my heart. This picture right here is the LeaderShape Institute session from almost 20 years ago, which is a little bit shocking, a little bit scary. When I was a participant at LeaderShape, which is the LeaderShape Institute, a week-long session, and I was a little junior there hanging out with these wonderful people for a week. And this really transformed my life. So much of my life journey, I credit to the people that I've met through this wonderful organization, but also the ways in which I started to and continue to think about myself, think about my interactions with others, and think about the impact that I wish to make on this world. I remember in connecting to the topic today around self-awareness and around thought work, back in 2002, when I attended LeaderShape, we were asked partway through the Institute to think about trying on a new behavior. Going against the grain is what we called it, or our gags. For those of you who've been involved with LeaderShape, you probably know what I'm talking about. And so I tended, especially then in my life, tended to be a very vocal individual in a group, always very eager to be one of the first people to talk in a group. Those of you who've known me for a long time are like, yep, that's the Paige I know. And sometimes didn't know when it was important to step back. And so that was eagerness and excitement, but it also maybe potentially blocked other folks or didn't allow space for other folks. And so I decided to try on the behavior of taking a step back and not always being in the driver's seat, not always being the first one to talk, right? And so I was trying on these behaviors in different settings. And then I remember we were preparing for our big LeaderShape review. So our big kind of presentation or skit that we do at the end. And I didn't know what to do because our group was struggling and we were having a little bit of conflict, as groups likely do. And I thought that my role at that point needed to be to just not say anything because I was trying on this gag of stepping in the back seat. And at some point, somebody just looked at me and said, Paige, aren't you going to contribute? I think we need you right now. And so I was like, I don't know what to do. But I looked back and we ended up pulling something wonderful together, of course, but I end up looking back at that and thinking that that was maybe the first time I consciously stopped to think about my thinking, to really think about what was going on in my head rather than just kind of going forward without doing that type of thoughtful reflection. Now, of course, I'd gone through many opportunities to reflect, but this was the first time I really started to question and kind of had that conversation in my mind of, is what I'm thinking about serving me right now, right? And that was such a great opportunity to try on something new. And then from there, kind of figure out, who do I want to be? How do I want to show up? But then what is also the thought process that needs to go on in my head to enable that to happen? So continuing on with LeaderShape, I've been involved with the organization ever since then, but had the great opportunity when serving as a cluster facilitator to work with Marcy Shankman and Scott Allen. They were both lead facilitators for the Institute when I was a cluster facilitator, and they were working on their book, Emotionally Intelligent Leadership. I got connected with them, and at that point really started to transition some of my work, my research. At the time I was, I think I was about to start my doctoral program in leadership studies. And so at that point, I really started to consider the role that emotional intelligence played in leadership, and worked with them and co-authored the second edition of the book with them in 2015. So now this focus on self-awareness is a big part of my professional life. I'm a faculty member. I try to incorporate some of these concepts into the courses that I teach. Some of my research focuses on this, and some of my speaking and consulting does. But also I think about the ways that this serves me and has really benefited in many aspects of my personal life. So in this session today, my aims are to provide some concepts about thought work to you all that I hope that you will find useful, provide some tangible exercises and tools that you can implement in your lives, and provide some further questions and prompts for you to take with you and for yourself and to share with others. I will be including at the end a link to additional resources and a worksheet that kind of goes over some of the exercises as well. I'm going to be practicing some vulnerability in this session. I'm going to be sharing some personal things. I really believe in the power of vulnerability, and I'm going to ask you at points in time to maybe join us in the chat, potentially unmute yourself and share an example. And if you are feeling courageous to want to do that, I would love that. All right, so we'll move on to the next slide. So today, just to give you a little bit of context, a lot of the work that we see in the leadership realm focuses on the different levels of, I guess, our society or of systems. And I mentioned earlier that I have done work around emotionally intelligent leadership. And one of the key takeaways from that model are the three facets of consciousness of self, consciousness of others, and consciousness of context. So self, others, and context. For those of you who are familiar with the social change model of leadership, of course, there's the individual, group, and community. So we, as we are thinking about how we show up in the world, how we navigate this world, we have there's an individual component, but there's also organizational components and societal and systemic components. Today, for the purposes of this session, we are going to be zooming in on the individual, okay? We know that the individual is very much impacted by the organizations and institutions in which they're connected, in which they operate, and also by the larger systemic and societal dynamics that exist. And there's lots of work to do at those other levels. I am not at all downplaying that. That's not the focus of the session today. It's not on those larger systemic concepts. So today, my aim is to focus on the power and agency of the individual, which then can help impact how we navigate the complex and imperfect organizations and society in which we live and we lead. Okay. In this session today, I plan to pull on work done in areas of neuroscience, emotional intelligence, concepts around mental models, self-compassion, influenced by ideas around growth mindset, humble inquiry, of using coaching models and resources, particularly from Brooke Castillo and Dr. Katrina Ubel. And at the end, I'll share, like I mentioned, a link where I've compiled some of these resources. I'll also be pulling from my own experiences today. All right, so next up is a quote, and I just wanted to invite you in the chat to type in what this quote might bring up for you. Old keys won't open new doors. A couple people want to pop into the chat. Good, I see David, my colleague here at Texas State. What got me here won't get me there. Exactly, what's worked me for? You always do what you've always done. You'll always get what you've always got. Good. Awesome. We're all on the same page here. It looks like this. Change requires change. I love that. That's very simple, but powerful at the same time. Good. So as we're trying to think about growth and moving forward, I think that we can often look at this and think and have some very readily available examples with our organizations, especially as we think about these last few years of needing to adapt our organizations due to COVID and other societal dynamics going on. Is the way that we've done things before may not work anymore, right? Some of you may be familiar with an ecology model of understanding organizations or people. If you think about ecology, and in order for organisms to thrive, they have to adapt. And the same goes for the organizations in which we work and live, but also for ourselves. So in order ultimately to shift our behaviors, which would be those keys, right? These new keys that we need, we have to be able to shift our thoughts. And this can be very hard to do, but it is entirely possible. Okay, so let me give you a couple examples of some thoughts that we end up shifting kind of regularly in our lives without maybe even knowing it. But we can easily typically do pretty well. So this example probably would have been even more relevant maybe 10 years or 5 years ago when we wrote checks more often, now that we use things like Venmo and Zelle and things like that. But think about the beginning of each new year. And we go to write the year, the date on the document, and we continue often to write the previous year. So it's January 4th and we write January 4th, 2021 on a check or on our notes that we're taking for the day or whatever. And then sometimes we forget about it and we leave it there. And then sometimes we look back, oh no, we have to change that to 2022, right? And then after maybe a few times of that, a few weeks of that, we have in our mind that new thought that it is 2022. Okay. It may take longer for some people to make that shift than others, but and we may even goof up months later. But when we go through that process, we forgive ourselves when that happens, right? And we just tell ourselves, oh yeah, it's not 2021 anymore; it's 2022, right? And we just think I don't write that anymore. I write this other thing now. Well, we can do the same thing with other thoughts. If there are thoughts that we have of I'm not competent or I can't do it, we can train ourselves to think, oh wait, I don't think that anymore. I'm thinking something else. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that and how we can do that in a little bit. Another example might be when you get a new car and you used to be able to put your car in drive in one way. Maybe it was next to the steering wheel like that. And maybe now you have to do it down near the center console area, right? And so we will reach for the thing and then our brain just tells us, no, we do it differently now, okay? So we have our ability to shift our thoughts about more emotionally charged thoughts as well, like I'm not capable of this, or I have to be perfect, or other things like that. So if we want to change ourselves, ultimately, we have to, and get different results, we have to learn how to adapt, and we have to learn how to adapt our thinking. So I want to share with you now this model, and we're going to go through it, and I want you, as we're going through this, to think about this in terms of yourself as well. So this is a self-coaching model. This is from Brooke Castillo. She runs a coaching school. And I find this model to be incredibly helpful in breaking down and understanding and addressing challenges or things that we would like to shift in our lives. I also call this just kind of the thought model. Okay, so what we do is we'll start at the top of the circumstance, right? So let me tell you a little bit about what a circumstance is. So this is neutral facts. It's something that everyone can agree on, indisputable. Okay, so an example would be it's 40 degrees outside. All right, that's what a thermometer, which is a scientific instrument, is telling us. It is 40 degrees outside. Okay, a thought. This is the idea or beliefs in our head that we have about the circumstance. So this could include descriptors, it could include judgments, it could include opinions. Okay. A feeling is the emotions that we have, or which is essentially vibrations in our body. Okay. Action is what we do or don't do. So this could be action, it could be inaction, or it could also be reaction. So what we do as a result of that feeling. Then the results is what the outcome is, right? So this is consequences, the outcomes of the action, inaction or reaction. So in this model, circumstances trigger our thoughts. So different circumstances trigger our thoughts. Our thoughts cause our feelings, and our feelings cause our actions, and our actions cause our results. Okay, so let's go with that example of a circumstance I provided earlier. So actually, before we started today, Abby and I were talking about just checking in, and we were talking about the weather, and she was saying it's spring here, and I see people walking around with shorts and a long sleeve shirt on. Abby, do you know what the temperature is there in Champaign?
I think it's 53, but sunny.
53.
Very, very
53,
sunny.
but sunny. Okay,
Yeah.
so let's go with 53 with sunny. Okay, so the circumstance would be it's 53 degrees and it's sunny outside. So Abby, if you don't mind me putting you on the spot. So what's the thought in your head about that weather?
I think it's been so cold for so long that now finally that it's almost mid 50s and sunny feels like, oh, summer is around the bend. Like we're heading towards warmer temperatures.
So this is warm, this is good, this is exciting. Cool. So I'm just going to focus on circumstance and thought right now to help us distinguish it. Okay, so I saw a number of wonderful folks in the room right now who are in the great state of Texas. Can I get one of my Texas people to tell me what your thoughts are if you looked at the weather today and it was 53 degrees and sunny?
I see Danielle says, that's winter.
That's winter in Florida, exactly.
Put a jacket on, Yvonne says.
Wear a jacket. Come on, I want to put one of my former students on the spot here. Unmute yourself. Let's say you were still in Texas, if you're no longer in Texas. You see, you're here, you're in the wonderful Sahi program here at Texas State. It's April, and you see that it's 53 degrees.
I will be bundling up.
Bundling up, right? It's like, oh gosh, we got to grab the fleece.
David calls it sweater weather.
Sweater weather, right. Okay, so this is a really good example, but the difference between a circumstance and a thought, right? So the circumstance is the same. It's a neutral fact. The thought differs based on our perspective, where we are coming from, what our past experiences are, what the days have been like leading up to this, right? I grew up in Colorado where, it snowed one time on the 4th of July, right? And now I live in Texas where it was literally like 92 degrees last week, right? So my perspective has shifted, right, at times, but still, I bet when I go back to Colorado, if it's like 40 degrees, sometimes I'm skiing in a t-shirt. I kid you not. So it's very, very weird. So, but those are the ideas and beliefs in our head about the circumstance. Okay, so let's give another example here. How about a difference between a circumstance and a thought might be the student spoke with a raised voice. Okay, so that would be the circumstance, like with a loud, like raised as in like louder than typical. Okay, what might a thought be if that's the circumstance that somebody might have about that student, how they might interpret that?
They're really excited about the content.
Really excited about the content. Good. What would be a different thought that might be different than what was just shared? Are they upset? I see Nash posted there. Are they upset? They might be frustrated.
That's what came to my mind as well, that there might be some anger or like hurt feelings behind that raised voice.
Right, trying to get someone's attention. Yeah, there might be some anger or frustration. I had put down in my notes, and so let's say the neutral fact is the student spoke with a raised voice. I think we could easily say the student was getting all worked up and was really angry, right? So that could be my interpretation of it, but that could be something very different from what the student was actually feeling or what somebody else's interpretation of it. Okay, so it's important that we become aware of, oh yeah, and good, yeah, and a raised voice can also be very culturally contextual. Thank you for bringing that up, Yvonne. So trying to distinguish between, oftentimes we look at our thoughts as being these neutral facts. And the reality is we're adding meaning, and we're adding our own context, our own context and our own perspectives to a circumstance. So I don't know if any of you can relate to this, but I grew up with a younger brother, and we often will reflect on our experiences growing up, and he and I will remember the same circumstance in completely different ways. Different facts, sometimes different interpretations of, oh, that was a positive experience, or that wasn't a positive experience, or just a completely different understanding of those situations. So when we think about things in different ways, that then impacts our feeling, our action, and results, as I talked about earlier. So what we want to do with this model is really try to focus on these circumstance and neutral facts and the thoughts that we have. And when we can start to parse out the meaning we're making based in a circumstance, then we can really understand how that affects us and actually ends up affecting our results and our actions. So I want to walk through this with something that I'm is kind of recent for me. Okay. So I am working, and I think I may have seen some folks on the call here or on the group here that might be part of this as well. So I'm working with a wonderful group of women on a book right now around women's narratives around leadership. And I missed a big deadline, okay, with some data analysis. And it was the week of our program interviews for admissions, and it was just, I totally missed this deadline. Okay, so the circumstance in this situation would be I missed a deadline. Okay, the thought that I had or could have as a result of that is I'm so disorganized and scattered. Okay, if I have that thought, then my feeling might be overwhelm or frustration at myself. The action could be being hard on myself, maybe blaming my busy schedule. Maybe I'm short with my family because I'm worried when I'll get it done. I just want to get things over with so I can get on my computer, right? So I might be short with the people who I'm around. And the result is that the deadline is still missed, right? But maybe I'm cranky. Maybe I negatively impacted the people around me, and probably not in the right headspace to do it. Okay. Can we go to the next slide, Abby, please? So what's really important is that our results then further impact our thoughts, okay? And the results are really a reflection of the thought. So what I want to think about is a different type of thought that I could try on in this situation, okay? So remember, the circumstances, I missed the deadline. And the thought I had before was that I am disorganized and I'm scattered. Okay, so what if I tried on a different thought? What if I tried on things have been really busy lately and I let this slip through the cracks? There were other more pertinent and timely things that I had to focus on. Okay, so rather than I'm scattered, I failed basically, right? Things have been really busy lately and I let this slip through the cracks. There were other more pertinent and timely things that I had to focus on. Okay, so my feeling might be disappointment still, but also a bit of self-understanding. I had a lot going on, right? And some motivation to get it done. All right. The action might be then that I carve out time in my schedule to get it done, maybe reprioritize some other things. And the results would be that I get it done. It's still late, but I'm probably in a better headspace to do it. Okay. I can't get to that point of having the new thought if I can't stop and think about my thinking. Okay, and that's a weird thing to talk about. It's a weird thing to think about, right? Thinking about your thinking. But we have the ability and capacity to do that. I'm going to give some tools.
Paige.
I know, it's crazy. And I'm going to talk about some tools of how we can do that. Now, one thing I want to talk about in this right now is often when we think about trying to do better, we focus often on our actions. What do I want to do differently next time? What I want to do differently next time. So actions, actions, actions. But that doesn't really help us get to the root cause of why we're taking those actions and why we're getting the results we have. The root cause is actually our thinking. And so we need to get to there to think about that thinking. Okay, so now I want to use this model one more time. And while I'm doing this, if there's folks that have a circumstance and a thought that they want to share in a minute, think about that. And I'd love for somebody to kind of walk through that so we could get another example. So I want to give you another example that is very real for me right now. I'm going to change how I used to say this. I used to say, I really want to write a children's book. I have an idea in mind. I'm going to instead to you all say, I'm writing a children's book, or I'm going to write a children's book. Okay. I've had this idea for almost 15 years. I have notes that I've brainstormed up. I have a catchy title that I still need to work with a little bit. I've looked into publishers, and then I just hit a roadblock. I just stopped. Okay. So I'm going to walk you through this. So the circumstance is trying to write a book, right? A children's book. So the thought is, I don't really know where to start, and I'm not sure I'll be any good at it. Feeling a little bit of fear and uncertainty. Action, not writing and beating myself up about it and making excuses. Okay, I do a lot of that. Results, no progress. And then that adds to my thoughts. So now I'm making no progress. So then it's just adding and confirming those thoughts, and maybe even makes them worse. Like I'm not motivated, or I'm a failure, or whatever that may be. Okay. Now, when I dug deeper and reflected on this a little bit more and did some thought work and some further exploration around this, I actually found out that it was around my fear of failure and fear of rejection. Professionally, I excel very, professionally. I'm in the process and should be finding out very soon now about being promoted to full professor. I publish a lot. In my professional world, I do a lot of stuff, right? Like I feel I get a lot of affirmation there. And I think that I realized I was afraid of some of this. What if publishers just don't even get back to me? What if they turn me down? What if I'm no good at this? What if I don't know how to write a children's book, which I don't, right? So now I want to use this model backwards that can be really helpful in this situation for me. Okay, so we're going to start at the bottom. Results. What's the results I want? I would like a draft of my children's book. And I could even put in there, I need to do this by when. Okay, so that would be making it more tangible. What actions do I need to do? So if I want that result, what actions do I need to do? Okay, so some actions I need to do is I probably need to look at some resources about children's literature. Of course, there's going to be information about what makes a good children's book. I remember when I did some research before, there's some helpful information like some online courses or things like that you can go through. So I need to do that. I need to carve out dedicated time to do this. I need to speak with the children's librarian. Maybe I know I will need to get some other books that are similar to share with the publishers, to say people who buy this type of book might buy this type of book. Talk to friends who've written children's books. I have a number of friends who have done that, so I need to talk to them. Okay, so if those are the actions that I want to take, then what are the feelings that I should have? And I'd love for people to put in here in the chat if they can, what feelings you think I should have, because I'm seriously working on this. So what feelings should I have? I should feel like it's attainable, feel confident moving forward. Thank you, Nash. I also want to give a quick shout out. I just saw that Petra Meyer just joined on here, and she is my colleague when I worked in Austria, and she's wonderful and does a wonderful work about emotional intelligence. So welcome. I'm glad you could join us, Petra. So, okay, good. I'm going to take excited and nervous. Thank you. Excited. Feeling satisfied with that. If Jimmy Fallon can write a children's book, Paige can totally do it. Thank you, Jenny. Yeah. Good. So what I had written down, and I'm going to try to take on some of these feelings that you all talk about, is courageous, hopeful, and excited. Okay. So I need to change my thought then, right? Remember, my thought before was I don't really know where to start, and I'm not sure I'd be any good at it. So I need to change that. So my new thought might be, it's going to be hard and take some new learning, but I have to start somewhere. Okay. So I hope that's helpful for you to think about. And I'm wondering if there's somebody who would be interested in talking about a circumstance and thought, either going from the model down or the model up. And if not, that's okay, but I'll leave a little bit of time, some space in case somebody wants to jump in.
Paige, maybe as people are screwing up their courage to share their example, I thought I would, just in hearing you process that, I was thinking like, oh, that would be what you would say to a friend who was in that circumstance,
Yes.
right? Like you eventually got to that
Yes.
language around like, what would you tell your dearest best friend if they were nervous about writing this book and
Yes.
building their confidence around it? And I really appreciate that.
Yes, thank you so much. Yes. So our self-talk, when we go through these types of models, we start to realize the self-talk we have, and often it's way harsher and unforgiving, much more unforgiving than the type of talk we would give to our best friend, our niece, our student, our colleague, right? And so thinking about that, thank you so much for bringing that up, Abby. Do we have somebody with some courage? I'll give you some extra credit points. Anybody want to take a stab?
Sure.
Oh, yay.
I'm happy to provide this just happened today moment.
Yes. And will you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. I'm Jennifer Niggemeier from the University of Michigan.
Wonderful. Tell us.
Okay. So the circumstance is I am switching roles within the university in the same school and college that I'm part of. But I am stepping away from the senior leadership team, and I'm going to be moving into a position where I am going to be running our leadership coaching initiative.
Okay. And what's your thought about, or do you want to start from the bottom up, or do you want to start from the top down?
No, I'll start from the top down. So part of the other circumstance, what happened today is a colleague, we got into an exchange where she said that this is an inequitable move and that my colleagues are all angry about it.
Okay.
So there's a lot of other people's thoughts there.
Right.
But
So some of what the circumstances in that circumstance is also thoughts, because it's making, it's thoughts around people's anger. Okay.
Yes.
So what is your thought process with this circumstance?
So my thought was, or is, this is not their decision to make.
Okay.
And I am hurt that they are what feels like they are being petty and putting an equity card on this in a way that I don't see it at all.
Okay. So different perspective. The thought is they're wrong, kind of, or like they're unjustified. And then the feeling is, and you had some in there, hurt.
Feeling is hurt. The feeling is disappointed in my colleagues, and then questioning
Questioning
is
kind
there
of
merit?
a situation.
Yeah,
is there merit in what they're saying? Yeah.
Is there merit, and am I the golden child, the golden one getting the all of the gifts, and is there too much privilege there? Right.
Okay. Yeah. And then what actions, now this is so new, so maybe there aren't actions right now, but what actions could come from that, those feelings and thoughts?
So I think an action is we've got to get more details out. So there's a lack of transparency about this move. And that's a systemic thing that needs to change. But that is an action that I believe needs to happen.
Yeah. So certainly there's actions that we can talk about could happen, but let's look at this model in terms of like, if you're having those thoughts and then having the feelings that you talked about. Now, I'm not saying these are the actions you're going to take, but what actions can come from feeling concerned? Is there merit in this? Feeling hurt, feeling, let me provide an example of what I think could be an action that somebody may do, not you necessarily in this situation, Jennifer, but some people could disengage from their colleagues. They could act disgruntled. They could be short. I'm not saying that short with others. I'm not saying that's what that, but that's
defensive, for sure, defensive.
Right. So that action can come from having that thought and that feeling, which then can result in disconnection from others. It could result in broken relationships, not having confidence in yourself, right, about this. And then that then can contribute back to the thoughts. Good. So what I would encourage you to do with this situation is then to take this model and later going through and saying, what results do I want? Because you don't want those results, right? And then just like I did with my children's book example, to walk through and say, if the results I want are to have meaningful relationships, to come to a sense of understanding with my colleagues about this, then you need to think about, well, what actions do I need to take to do that? And if I do those actions, what are the feelings I need to have to enable me to do those actions? And then ultimately, what are the thoughts that I need to try on different from the thoughts that you're having? That makes sense? So that's how this model could be used. Thank you so much, Jennifer, for sharing. I know we don't have time to go back up through it, but just in sharing that shows how real and emotional these situations can be, right? And I'm sure we all have examples from workplace scenarios, from our personal lives, where circumstances can just trigger these thoughts. And the key thing with this is not to beat ourselves up about these thoughts, right? Because this is a very normal thing that we have. And actually, can we pull up right now poll number 2, Abby? Because I think that's really relevant right now.
Yep, there you go.
So according to research, approximately how often are our thoughts negative as a whole, kind of like average of people, not us in this group?
Okay, give people a couple more seconds to respond here. Okay, let me display these results for you. 75% of the time. Does that sound right, Paige?
So it was funny when I sent this poll to Abby, she wrote back, she goes, I'm so glad one of the options wasn't 100% of the time. So research shows that about 82% of the time. So nobody was right, but I just felt like if I put 82, y'all would be like, okay, that's more precise than 75. So research shows that about 82% of the time we have negative thoughts. So it's completely normal to have negative thoughts, right? Research also shows that about half of the emotions we tend to feel are negative. And some of these are very fair and reasonable, right? And healthy in many ways. Like, it's good to have thoughts that feeling like what's going on in the Ukraine right now is terrible, or feeling concerned and sad about an accident you just drove by on the freeway. We're meant to have thoughts that aren't positive and to have negative emotions. Like, that's part of being human, right? But when are there thoughts that we're having that we need to work on, right? And when can this thought model that we have here be useful? So the answer is when our thoughts become debilitating, when your thoughts aren't serving you in reaching your goals, whether that's a tangible goal like the book that I shared with you, or other goals like having a healthy relationship or having healthy physical or mental health, right? And as we go through this, because the goal here isn't to beat ourselves up over having negative thoughts. Negative thoughts are completely normal, right? And as we go through some of this type of work, you might start to really uncover and some things that you don't necessarily like about yourself or that you're ashamed of, right? So learning how to go through that with curiosity, with compassion, and ask yourself questions about it rather than judgments. So be curious. I wonder why I feel that way. I wonder why I feel like I'm afraid to fail at this children's book thing? Is it because I have always kind of done well and I'm an achiever and I get these, gold stars, right? And that, even though I know that shouldn't be motivating for me, so sometimes you can uncover some things, right? Also, we have like between 40,000 and 60,000 thoughts a day. Okay, some of them just come and go and just float by, right? We don't think about them. Then some of them we kind of focus on more, and they can really impact, like I said, our feelings and our thoughts. So I want to do an activity with you that I hope will be helpful. And if we can go to the next slide, Abby, that would be great. So this activity is about challenging and tampering down a thought that isn't serving you. Okay, so what I have here is about a meeting. Okay, so we all have different thoughts about meetings, right? So let's say that we have a thought about meetings that, well, let me ask you, what are some of the thoughts that you've heard about meetings, that people say about meetings, or thought that you've had about meetings? Waste of time, could have been done in an email, unproductive, or we're just meeting to meet. Tell these people work in higher education. I'm just kidding. Okay, so good. So meetings are not good, but place for divergent thinking. Good, Abigail. Love it. Okay, so let's say we have a thought, meetings are a waste of time. Okay, let's think about how we can tamper down that thought to get to a thought that might serve us better. Because if we look back at that previous model, which actually, can you go back one slide, Abby? If our thought is meetings are a waste of time, then we're going to go into there feeling annoyed, feeling kind of unsettled, like we should be doing something else, right? Those types of things. Our actions would be, we maybe don't pay attention as much as we should be. Our brain just may not even be in there, and the results are the meeting isn't useful, right? We didn't get out of it. So thank you. And you can go back to that other slide. So if we want to tamper down that thought, meetings are a waste of time, we can start to lighten that up a little bit. So maybe we can, rather than thinking meetings are a waste of time, we could think some meetings are necessary and important. We could try that on for a little while. So we're getting ready to go to a meeting, just like we try on the new date, right? It's not 2021 anymore, it's 2022, right? We try that on. Sticks, right? So maybe we just try on a different thought. Some meetings are necessary and important. So we notice ourselves saying, oh, another meeting, meetings are such a waste of time. Say, nope, I don't think that way anymore. Some meetings are necessary and important, right? And we try that on for a little while. And then maybe we might be able to get to a point to say, I can see value in meetings to move some projects forward, right? Maybe we can try on a different thought. Meetings can have value. Or I get new ideas and a push forward from meetings, right? So if you'll notice, the aim isn't to say meetings are the best thing in the world. I want my day to be filled with meetings all the time. You love meetings, but it can get to a more neutral place and a place of acceptance. And you can, if you want to, you can be really excited about meetings, but that's not the point of this. It's so that you can get your thoughts to a place where they can serve you, right? So if you can go to the next slide, Abby. So that may help us better experience meetings and have better feelings about them, which can result to our better actions and then better results. So if we go into it thinking like some meetings serve purpose, they can help us move projects forward, then we might go into the meeting with a different type of feeling, right? Feeling like, maybe I'm excited to see my colleagues. Maybe I'm feeling motivated to move forward on this project. So then the actions might be that I'm thinking about more tangible action steps. Maybe an action might be I agree to help a colleague on a project, whatever that may be. And the results end up being better. And then that in turn, yes, I agree. It's nice to have human contact again with meetings. That in turn goes back and influences our thoughts. And so the more positive opportunities to go through that thought model, the ways that our thoughts can shift. Okay. So I'm wondering if somebody has, if we go to the next slide, please, Abby, if somebody has a thought that we may want to, well, I don't think we have the time to do that, but think about this for you. What thought do you have that you need to tamper down a little bit, that you need to make less strong, right? As we look at this kind of metaphor of coffee, black coffee to basically milk with maybe a dab of coffee there, right? So, and the goal again isn't to necessarily tamper it all the way down, but can we start to think about different ways of thinking that can serve us better? So maybe it's something like, I'm not capable. So maybe you're working on a dissertation or a thesis and you're feeling like, I'm not capable. Can you get to a place of saying like, this is hard work, but I can try to find the tools, right? I know this is hard, but I can dedicate time and energy to this, right? Not research is the best thing in the world and I love writing, right? That isn't necessarily the goal. I see that, Abby. I like that. The good, consistent sleep. There's actually some really good resources about that. Okay, so when we get in the habit of doing this, thinking about our thinking about a model, thinking about how we can tamper it down, our thought model that we have, our thought and how we can tamper it down, we get to a place where we can more intentionally move forward. We can have more control. We can be more thoughtful and purposeful in our thinking, which then impacts our feelings, our responses, which ultimately produces the results that we want. Okay, so I want to share with you a quote, and then I want to leave you with one last tool. So Viktor Frankl is just a wealth of knowledge, and I really like this quote from him. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response, and in our response lies our growth and our freedom. Okay, so this is really about having a purposeful pause. Okay, I attended Dr. Willie Banks' session with LeaderShape on Wednesday, and this topic came up there too, around that intentional, purposeful pause, right? And research in neuroscience, it talks about this, our brain's ability to get perspective and be more thoughtful in how we are thinking about things, which in turn affects our feelings, our actions, and results. Some of you may also know the phrase name it to tame it. When we can name our emotions, or and I'd also argue our thoughts, we can better understand them, we can better tame them, we can better work with them. Okay. So I want to leave you with one last activity or tool that can be really helpful. And it's not going to be entirely surprising to folks, but I'd like to encourage you to think about how often you actually do this. So we often, for those who work with students or in a training capacity with anybody, we often talk about the importance and power of reflection. And I want us to encourage us to think about ourselves of how often we actually engage in this. And I'm calling myself out on this too, because I'm kind of going through a lot of thought work, particularly around my physical and mental health lately. And in this process, I have been focusing on implementing many of these tools I'm talking with you about today. And this is the one that was the hardest and the last thing I really took on, but it's been so powerful, right? So this is to help uncover our thoughts and get more perspectives, is doing a thought download or a thought dump. And this is just taking 5 minutes every day. It can be longer, but start with 5 minutes and just putting down what's on your mind, putting down your thoughts, your ideas, right? You can write it. I have my very own little Harry Potter book that's really nice. And that's a special thing for me. Some of you might want to do it on Evernote or something on your computer or whatever it might be, but you find something that works for you. And what you can do in this is you can uncover patterns in your thinking, uncover themes, thoughts that come up, things that aren't serving you, things that keep on coming up. And again, as you go through this, to think about self-compassion, think about curiosity rather than judgment. I wonder why this keeps on coming up. I wonder why my relationship with this situation or this person keeps on coming up, rather than, God, why can't I just get over this? Why is this still bothering me? I wonder why. What's there? What do I need to uncover? Do I need to go through a thought model with that? Do I need to tamper down a thought that I have? Right. And so I encourage you to do this. Look at the judgments that you may be making while you're doing that. Are you, saying that you have to do something really well? What does doing something really well mean? Right. Have you created these thoughts in your mind about what's good or bad or right or wrong? And probably, if so, we need to kind of walk through that a little bit. So what we have on the screen next, we are running out of time, is I would just want you to think about, well, actually, Abby, why don't you put up poll 3 and we'll just end on that note, which is you can put it on the next one if you want. Poll 3 is, in what realm could you most benefit from thought work? So thinking about what we've talked about today, in what realm could you most benefit from engaging in some of this thought work? all that's up there. You'll see that there are some guiding questions or just some thoughts that you may want to take with you to think about with this work. And you'll also see a QR code there, and I'll put it in the chat too, is, oh, that's the wrong one. That's the Zoom. Let me put the note in the chat here too. But on my website, I just put a bunch of resources related to this. I put together a little worksheet or a little handout that goes over these different exercises and some links to some great books there. But yeah, so I see on here professional relationships, personal health and wellness, leadership and management and supervision, right? So, you know, this can really be used in all different aspects of our lives. Included on the website or the QR code are the various questions that I have up in here. I just got so excited about this that I always do this, though I should know this. There's not really time at the end, but I'm going to hang out and I'm going to pass it off to Abby, because I know that she's going to wrap it up for us.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for this, Paige. I think you're seeing this in the comment section too, but this is so helpful in thinking about how we process our own thoughts and how we use that in our workspaces and our personal relationships, in our own self, and how we talk to ourselves and what that looks like as we process thoughts and results and feelings and consequences related to that as well. So thank you so much for that and for this resource that you've shared as well. And thank you for all who've joined us for this hour as well. It was an action-packed hour with lots of really helpful information and audience participation too. So thanks for that vulnerability and sharing as well. Again, if you're new to LeaderShape, if this is the first time you've interacted with LeaderShape, then just a note that here are 4 of the 6 or 7 programs that we now offer. I think I need to update this slide. We have virtual and in-person programs that you can connect with LeaderShape about other than this virtual series as well. And then we continue to be a not-for-profit organization. We'll continue to offer this virtual series for free for folks. We hope to have another one in June over the summer break when perhaps people have a little bit more time. But because we're a not-for-profit, if folks want to make a donation, there's a link there for people to be able to do that. And I know we are right at the top of the hour when folks probably have other meetings to get to as well. So I will stop our sharing here so we can just see people on screens. If people have questions or anything else that they want to bring up or ask or share in the resources, share in the chat as another resource, please feel that you can do that.
Thanks for coming, everyone. I'll hang on if anybody has a question or anything at all.